All right. I think we're live. Push one in the chat if you can hear me. All right. Thank you for the confirmation. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 792, Space and Technology. Please hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust. There's a doc in the description beneath the video for you to follow along with and reference. If you want to join the panel, there'll be a link in the chat as well. Make sure you update your Zoom client before joining, or you won't be able to join. And we'll get started. Let me share my screen. And let me add the link in the chat for those who want to participate. All right, let me know you can see my screen. All right, thank you for the confirmation. Let me go through this article real quick. First item on the docket is from Jaguar, augusta.edu. Augusta University cybersecurity grad soars to NASA and beyond. Expand this out. 4 years ago, Gabriel Horton was a senior at Richmond County Technical Career Magnet School, thinking he was headed to Augusta University to study computer science. Today, Horton is preparing to walk across the stage, receive his cybersecurity diploma, and begin a summer internship with NASA. Quote, at Richmond County Technical Career Magnet School, we had networking, cybersecurity, culinary, and audio and visual pathways. It is a school that focuses on STEM courses, Horton said. At the time, I wasn't interested in cyber. I wanted to be a computer scientist, but that all changed when I got to Augusta University. Horton enrolled in a cyber class taught by Ahmed Alarad, PhD, and an associate professor in the School of Computer and Cyber Sciences. Quote, we started doing pen testing, Horton said, explaining that pen testing, otherwise known as penetration testing, is an exercise where cybersecurity experts attempt to find and exploit vulnerabilities in computer systems to identify weak spots in its defenses. Quote, I immediately thought, wow, this is very fun. I could really get into this. From then on, I knew cyber was my career path. I'll be interning with NASA this summer, so it's been an incredible journey. Horton said the School of Computer and Cyber Sciences at Augusta University thoroughly prepares students for a future career by ensuring they have proper internships along the way. This past summer, I was a student intern with the with information technology at Army Cyber Command and did things like help simulate an attack to test if the cyber cadets can secure a network from hackers, criminal organizations, and advanced persistent threat. Horton said that internship was for 10 weeks. But for the past 7 months, Horton has been interning with the United States Secret Service. Quote, with the United States Secret Service, I'm doing open source intelligence, Horton said. At NASA, I'll be doing the same thing that I'm currently doing with the Secret Service. At Augusta University, Horton has been active as an undergraduate research assistant and member of the Phi Kappa Phi Honor Society, Epsilon Pi Epsilon International Honor Society for the Computer and Information Disciplines, Phi Epma Sigma National Honor Society, the National Society of Leadership and Success, the Society for Collegiate Leadership and Achievement, and Club de Español. Horton was also one of 7 students at Augusta University selected in 2021 as part of the inaugural cohort of the Federal Cyber Corps Scholarship for Service program. This program, which was sponsored by a $3.2 million grant from the National Science Foundation, is dedicated to recruiting and training the next generation of cybersecurity professionals by providing scholarships for up to 3 years of support for cybersecurity education at the undergraduate and graduate levels. Following his summer internship with NASA, Horton plans to return to Augusta University to join the Master of Science in Information Security Management program. Quote, I just know I want to get my master's degree after I graduate, but from there, I am still not sure, he said. I will probably work with the Army or Savannah River National Laboratory, or possibly continue with the United States Secret Service. Cyber is such a broad field with so many opportunities. Sorry, this is lagging for a second. But first, Horton is looking forward to his parents and his older brother and alumnus of Augusta University watching him accept his cybersecurity degree. My parents are so happy for me because I picked a degree that can pay my bills, Horton said, laughing. I think they are even more pleased that I picked a career that I like and that I enjoy, that I will be able to support myself. I tip my hat to this guy. As someone who works in cybersecurity myself, he has had more opportunities than anybody I have ever heard of when it comes to cybersecurity. At his age, when I came into cybersecurity, it was not as, it was at the early stages of like, those 2008, 2009 academic year. And so a lot of companies weren't really hiring directly like that. And so cybersecurity is more of a recent thing, not so much of a traditionally, legacy with technology. It came after the fact, not before the fact. And so I just think that, I have to tip my hat to him. I really am impressed by what he's done so far. And I think that, he should be congratulated everywhere he goes for the amount of effort he has put in. Renaissance man, what's going on?
Hey, what's up, Mike?
Nothing much, bro. What do you think about this?
Yeah. That's one thing I've noticed too. You were saying like cybersecurity. The way I think you're saying is that it wasn't something like computer programming or even building a computer hardware engineering, where kids were doing this when they were 13, 14, years old, something like that, and kind of got a jump start and got years of experience. It's very much a field that's evolving and new as you've gotten more smartphones, more connectivity, 5G, all of these things. And what I'm seeing is I'm seeing more, like when I do see Black men who work in tech, I'm seeing more and more who are actually in cybersecurity or trying to pivot into it. And I think that's part of it. I do also think, and maybe I didn't know when I graduated, but it seems like more programs have popped up for, minorities, Black students, kids from underrepresented backgrounds. It seems like those paths that there's more and more things that have been started in the past, like, 10 years, really since I've graduated, and maybe a little bit before, or maybe when I was in, that are sort of helping these people who don't have a traditional, path in via, family member or family connections, that those things are there. The other thing, when it talks about like NSN and all of that, National Science Foundation, yeah, there's a National Science Foundation, there is a lot of stuff out there from like, one of the things I'm looking at, there's a tech incubator that I've applied for, where they'll basically, you can go and apply even if you're not an entrepreneur. You can work to take some technology that's been developed in an FFRDC, federally funded research and development institution, and basically try to see if there's a market for it, and try to go and build a business around it. So I'm looking at applying to that. But there's all sorts of these programs that are out there that are, I honestly don't think they do a good job of really getting it out there. You almost have to go and look and just almost Google search to come across it. But there's all sorts of programs out here like that that can find money or help you get experience. So no, I tip my hat for this brother for, taking advantage of this opportunity. And then, like you said, I think you said he's going back to school for his master's.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good thing to do. Different people do it different times. Some people, go get the experience and then, get the company to sponsor it. Some people just do it straight out of undergrad. Really no right answer there, but I applaud taking advantage of that opportunity as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, cybersecurity back then was not how ChatGPT is promoted now, right? ChatGPT is the thing, right? If you know anything about ChatGPT, or if you're trying to make investments from the Wall Street side, that's like a sure bet, right? Cybersecurity back then was not treated like that. It was kind of like a mundane sort of thing that many organizations kind of pushed to the side. They did not really want to get involved. Well, I shouldn't say they didn't want to get involved with it, but security slows down development progress in many organizations. And so what happens more often than not is that security gets, it's not made the ultimate priority it wasn't made the ultimate priority back then. And so I think now you start to see it because many organizations got bitten over the last couple of election cycles, where they've had their data compromised, their systems have been compromised, and now they need people and they don't have enough of them. And so this is a perfect opportunity for Black men to get into tech. But I think that when you're as ambitious as this brother is, you're on your way to doing really big things in ways that most people can't even imagine. It's obvious that this guy has much bigger ambitions than many people that I've met in cybersecurity and that I currently work with. He's gotten an internship at NASA, Secret Service. I don't know anybody who's gotten those type of opportunities as in that age range. When I was younger, I didn't get any opportunities like that. A lot of my stuff was, very much word of mouth.
Yeah. The other thing is too, with I think the network of schools, that plays a part as far as more schools, pushing it. But I think to your point of cybersecurity as well, it's kind of one of those things that I want to say it's kind of like you pointed out. It's kind of an afterthought to people because it's not a problem until it's a problem. Like it's not a problem until it doesn't get on people's radar necessarily until you have Equifax or something like that. What happens with them where all this data gets compromised, then it's a huge deal. And I think so. And another thing is technology is developing so quickly that the security aspect has to keep up, and the push is always going to be to be the first to market with this new technology, even if unfortunately that's hey, it may not be proofed out 100% from that angle of things. So it kind of becomes an afterthought until it blows up in people's face. But it's kind of like, it's one of those essential things that's always going to be there. It's kind of like, you could argue, Like in the same way people always argue that you're always going to need mechanics to fix, cars and things like that in some form of fashion, whether, they're turning wrenches or, doing diagnostics on a laptop. Cybersecurity is sort of that same thing. As long as you have it, as long as you have technology, you're always going to need it. So it's a lot of job security there as well.
Yeah. All right. Next item on the docket is from Georgia Tech. Working to build a more positive world through rap and engineering. This should be interesting. On any given night, you might find Tyree Edwards in his closet, sleeping bag over the door to help with sound isolation, recording a new track. It will almost certainly be in the wee hours of the morning when creativity peaks for the graduating Georgia Tech civil engineering student. Edwards creates the beats, writes and raps the lyrics, and mixes and masters the finished tracks. Then his video production business, a partnership with his brother and best friend, creates the music videos. He calls his music Carib Soul, a mix of hip hop drums with Caribbean and reggae-inspired rhythmic elements and a splash of melodies similar to R&B and soul. And it's all focused on messages of positivity and love. I'm just tired of hearing, especially in the hip hop and rap genre, music that's so negative. It degrades women and it's all about money, cars, and clothes, Edwards said. That's not what hip hop started off as. So if I want to see change, I have to be the change. And I went to YouTube University and started learning how to make my own beats and started rapping. Edwards may have had some of that in his blood. His dad was an executive for the Wu-Tang Clan at one time, so he was around music all the time. His mother's family is from Mexico and Belize, and the family moved to Mexico in Edwards' junior year in high school. He did virtual school and didn't speak Spanish well, so he felt isolated. Music became a creative outlet. The creative urge is what led him to civil engineering, too. Edwards spent many summers with his grandparents in Belize. The poor condition of the infrastructure always stuck with him. Interesting. I saw how bad the roads were and the lack of central water distribution. They harvest rainwater and if it doesn't rain, or if there's no water in the storage system, then there's no water. You had to go to a local well, pull up a bucket, and take a shower with the bucket, said Edwards, who grew up south of Atlanta in Henry County. Quote, seeing how they live with this poor infrastructure, I had to do something about that. That was really my motivation for going to civil engineering. As he wraps up that journey and prepares to start work at Bechtel on the corporate construction team, Edwards is shaping an idea to realize that dream. He'd like to build a regenerative multifamily homes in Belize and other developing countries. I want to be more than net zero carbon emissions, more than sustainable. I want to be regenerative, where home gives back to the environment. The technology is starting to come together, Edwards said, and he's excited that Bechtel is one of the companies working on a project in Saudi Arabia called The Line to build a new kind of urban living experience. He'd like to get involved in that work eventually to learn how the project will achieve its goal of 100% renewable energy and prioritizing health and well-being. Edwards' job at Bechtel came as a result of a connection he made at a national conference for minority students in engineering. The internships he's finishing this semester at an engineering firm, Jacobs, comes from talking to a parent at one of Georgia Tech's engineering information sessions, where Edwards presents to prospective students and families. Both of those opportunities were facilitated by the college's Center for Engineering, Education, and Diversity, SEED, which became a second home and a safe haven for Edwards. Said. Without SEED, go ahead.
No, continue. I'll let you finish.
Yeah, without SEED, I probably wouldn't even be in college right now. They provided me with the employment scholarships and all the opportunities. Without them, I wouldn't have had the internship I am in right now with Jacobs. And I wouldn't have my career starting August 15th with Betchel. Edward said, I really attribute a lot of my success to the SEED office and the people there. They looked out for me. Engineer and musician, two parallel paths, or is there some integration of Edwards' two signature passions? There is a connection, he said. My motivation behind the music was trying to create positive, joyful music to make people happy. And same thing with the housing idea. I want to enhance people's lives. So in that regard, it has a nexus point. Edwards starts working at Betchel's Virginia office in mid-August. In the meantime, he has some international travel plans and a gig performing at the Belize International Music and Food Festival in July. Edwards was one of the winners of a pre-festival competition. That's a dream come true. The headlining artists are some legends in the Caribbean genres of music, Edwards said. Having that on my resume is like, okay, Tyree, you're actually doing this. I'm pretty impressed by this. You have a lot of guys in the manosphere who can't even walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. When you have this brother, doing rap, hip hop, engineering, all at the same time.
Yeah. Now this is a great article, lots of gems in it. Several things I want to point out. One, I think it's impressive that, him talking about going to Belize, seeing the infrastructure, using that as motivation to go major in engineering, with that vision of change, that's what I try to point out in this space, when guys are sitting around talking about, who should and shouldn't be dating bus drivers. We have all these issues going on out here. we have all these issues going on out here where, this brother's, seeing something and, seeing a problem and using that as motivation to, go to school, be a major in that, in a field that can actually make a difference in it. If we had men focused on these things on, hey, whether it be, seeing the poor infrastructure in black community and becoming a civil engineer, wanting to fix that, or, seeing the, financial literacy, you got some people doing it, but not enough in mass, that's one thing. But then one thing that it really stood out that I always try to highlight too, when I hear a lot of people talking down on college and higher education is, he points out the fact that he got his job and his internship basically through the school that, he was giving a presentation to some students and, a parent in there mentioned, I believe Jacobs, and, he was able to get an internship there. And then he talked about the Office of Minority, basically a minority advancement placement office that all schools
Seed.
have. Creed, yeah, wasn't it? Seed, that's what it was. Seed. Yeah, he talked about that as well. Center for Engineering, Education, and Diversity. All schools are going to have something similar to that. That because you're an underrepresented group in engineering. They're trying to expand it, and see that's what you miss when guys talk about, hey, I can go on YouTube and learn all these skill sets and things like that. You miss that network of this brother's gotten 2 opportunities just from that, and like I said, that's not even tying in the fact of how that will pay off for you down the road. Georgia Tech is a really strong brand for a school. Any engineering job that he wants to go to really in the world, he has Georgia Tech on his resume. They're automatically gonna, say, hey, this brother's smart. He knows what he's doing. There's all that where it's just gonna be a bunch of positives. And when guys, pass up these opportunities, I don't think they really understand what they're missing out on, because Georgia Tech even has a partnership with Morehouse and Spelman, whereas, if you're majoring in engineering with them, you can go to school for undergrad for 2 years and then take your classes, your engineering classes at Tech, and then you basically come out with a tech degree and your HBCU degree. So all this is great. It's a great story, and I don't think we've heard the last of this brother. He sounds like he's going to do some big things in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point you bring up about a lot of brothers thinking they can YouTube their way through everything, in terms of like, well, I can just learn how to code doing this. And it's like, well, yeah, that's true and all, but, but what about your networks? Where's your social capital going to be built at? And these sort of institutions are what build that social capital. That's the reason why they're so prominent, for enrolling in these sort of sciences and disciplines. And I think that, if you think you're going to engineer your way, to success by YouTube or going to Udemy, you would be sorely mistaken. This is a different sort of animal to take on. I don't think that most people even understand the significance of this. But, I think some of the community colleges, I know here we have pre-engineering at the community colleges. They just made community colleges free here. GEDs are free too. The majority of people who get their GEDs in the city are actually Black men. I think like 65% or something like that, or 58% or something like that get their GEDs. And so when you really think about the sort of opportunity that's going to become available by going to these institutions, it's not about assimilating or LGBTQ or any of these other ideals that they have about
not getting posted.
Yeah, guys scared to go to school because they're going to get Me Too'd. That's not what we're talking about here. That's not what's going on. When you have, programs like SEED, Center for Engineering Education and Diversity, you miss out on opportunities when you don't enroll in these things. I was fortunate enough to have a really tight network in undergrad myself, working with some, my professors were actually in the field already. So for them, they were just adjunct professors, but, I had the ability to leverage their knowledge. They knew how to talk to people. They wrote, referrals for me. Those sort of opportunities don't come from YouTube. Your PhD, despite all the PhDs in the space, I don't think they're writing any referrals for content creators at this point.
No. And national conference, they pointed that out as well. Being a part of these organizations, you have all sorts of, national conferences that you'll get to attend, network with students who don't even go to school with you. So, if you're someone who lives in Atlanta, but you aspire to live on the West Coast somewhere, you can make a connection at one of these national conferences as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he gets to travel to the, to the Middle East.
Yeah. Also, all sorts of opportunities, like I said, that will open up just from, like I said, the undergraduate experience. And that's the thing. Like, at least what I've seen in my career is that everything has sort of every step has opened the door to the next step. For me, I got my job through career services, which I never would have got it because no one in my family was tied to this industry or anything that I do. And that's led to me being able to go to grad school. With company support, things along those lines. So it's a cascade effect. Like one door just opens the next. And, I think guys are really missing the mark when they just think that, they can sort of shoestring the stuff together.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next item on the docket. This is from afro.com. Black children deserve representation in STEM fields. As a former teacher and forever educator, my philosophy and approach to education was heavily shaped by Zarita Hammond. Being a Black woman, I know firsthand how important it is, or how important it was, that the children in my class saw themselves represented across the content we consumed, especially for subjects like math and science, which often lack diversity or include cultural biases. This has led to industries such as tech being overwhelmingly dominated by white men. Black employees account for only 8% of the tech workforce. And according to a report from AnitaB.org, Black women only 1.7%. In order to increase the pipelines of historically marginalized communities in computer programming, engineering, and other emerging fields, we must tackle the issue at its root, addressing the inequities that exist in education, particularly in computer science. This means developing and implementing STEM educational content that is intellectually challenging and culturally relevant for students, from the books they read to the videos they watch to the tests they take. Studies show that culturally responsive education improves academic outcomes and benefits all students. The research supports what myself and thousands of other educators have seen firsthand, that children of color feel supported in school when they not only trust their teachers, but when the content they consume reflects their community and culture. This approach to teaching is not new or complicated and has been happening in classrooms across the country for years. For example, as a teacher in Brooklyn, New York, I often had to adjust activities so that they would better resonate with my students. Instead of word problems that mention golf or farming, my assignments connected with their everyday experiences like riding the subway or familiar events like the West Indian Day Parade. Representation and cultural competency across educational content is critical for children of color to stay engaged in those subjects. Right now, diversity in STEM curricula continues to miss the mark, often centering white, male, affluent communities. This major gap is why Black Girls Code recently partnered with Goldie Blocks on the creation of Code Along, a series of free online coding tutorial posted to YouTube that prioritizes the representation of Black girls in every video. This is not to pat ourselves on the back. Code Along is an example of how organizations and institutions can work together to create innovative bottom-up solutions to address the staggering lack of diversity in STEM educational content. Culturally responsive education is not just a talking point, but an urgent need that has been demanded by Black students and students of color for years. There is a strong appetite for inclusive computer science curricula, and the numbers from Code Along prove it. Post after post, and the engagement has continued to increase, reaching 23 million impressions and over 600,000 in just a matter of weeks. This series is successful because every detail has been carefully designed to connect with our audience. Black girls not only see themselves in the host, who is both dynamic and affirming, but they also resonate with the material. Each video is infused with larger topics and trends that Black girls care about, such as the beauty of natural hair, how they can be change makers in their school communities, and more. Code Along is just one small piece of a much larger puzzle to address a systemic issue that has locked Black girls and students of color out of career opportunities for decades. Access to inclusive STEM curricula is a civil rights issue that directly impacts the ability for marginalized communities to exist as our full selves within a new emerging tech society. For too long, we have experienced the consequences of a mostly white, male-dominated tech industry that not only affects internal business practices, but also the products many of us need to use every day. The lack of diversity in STEM is how we end up with self-driving cars that hit Black pedestrians because they cannot detect darker skin or pulse oximeter devices that provide less accurate results to Black users. The solution is not impossible. Right now, politicians are waging a culture war, intentionally conflating critical race theory with social emotional learning. Black history and gender studies in an attempt to force teachers back into a whitewashed old boys club curriculum that only further ostracizes students of color in the classroom. And although it may feel like a David and Goliath fight, the good news is that there are steps all of us can take to push back and create an inclusive learning environment for students. Moving the needle takes a village. Critical thinking and a challenge to the status quo, all essential investments to the future in which we should want our children to live. I actually don't disagree with this at all. In fact, I think that I think that we've talked about this many times before, that the lack of representation in a lot of these areas of STEM have played a significant role as to why you have such a difficult time teaching Black boys, or Black males for that matter, how to really advance themselves within these programs. I think it's an obligation on us who are in STEM to actually to give back, right? And I think that, you know, King Tort in the chat, I think he's talked about that last week, that, you know, it's also an obligation on us to do it. But I also think that, you know, when it comes to content creation, I think one of the things that we've tried to do in the Brain Trust is that we try to leverage this channel to connect Black men to some of the emerging technology discussions that are happening. And I don't really see anybody else in the manosphere really doing that. And so we kind of took it upon ourselves to actually engage this, you know, this area, and we're kind of comfortable with it. And I think that we're making some traction. I think, you know, the numbers tell us that, you know, we don't have 10,000, 20,000 views or impressions, but we do have a considerable amount of people that say, yeah, this resonates with me and this is what I like. Right, Sauce Man?
Yeah, no. This hits on something very interesting for me, in the sense of, if you look at what's going on around the country with really state legislatures really trying to control the curriculum in schools in a lot of these red states. You know, this article, if anything, speaks to me of the importance of local control. Like when they talk about being able to relate to students, you know, to their background. So, you know, instead of something like farming, you know, talking about something like you said, the Caribbean parade, things along those lines. You know, that's really taking your curriculum and really tailoring it to your students and really making it real to them. So it's not just, you know, just something they have to sort of sit through and be bored. So, you know, that's powerful. But the representation piece as well, it's especially important when if you have kids who don't have a direct tie to it, so they can't see it in their personal lives, they can't see anyone like themselves in there, coupled with if they don't see it in the field, it's really hard to do something when you don't have someone, you know, that you can look to as an example. And then, you know, if you're talking about someone who's a person of color in this country, even more so, seeing that someone who looks like them can thrive in these spaces, you know, that's super important. I mean, we've seen the data just in schools alone. You know, if a Black boy has just one Black male teacher, like the chances of him dropping out go down like 50% or something like that. So, you know, if that's one in the school setting, so you can imagine what it does if, you know, if a kid aspires to be an engineer and they can go see a Black engineer, learn from, or someone who's Black who's going to push them in that direction. So, you know, I think it goes back to absolutely representation matters. I mean, we've seen it from things like the doll test as far as kids being small. I mean, there really shouldn't be any argument about this at this point. And I hope this continues to move forward because, you know, STEM has been an area that, you know, just historically, if we're going to move into, especially when you start talking about moving into fields that are new territories for families, when you start talking about, hey, the first person in your family who's an engineer, the first person who's in, you know, who went to college, you know, all of these things. This becomes very important. I'll never forget one of the engineers I worked with, Black guy, who was an engineer. You know, he talked about his, he had an uncle that was an engineer. So that's what really got him into it. So he had that family connection. But like I said, not everybody has that. So the representation has to be there.
Yeah, I you know, I know some people would disagree with it. You know, I know Ike in the chat makes a comment. He says that if you can't learn from people who don't look like you, you won't go very far in life. But I would have to push back against that because of how the United States is structured historically in modern wise, you still have systemic racism, which is structural, and it's designed that way to prop up white men, no matter what. I mean, if you look at most, what do you call it, in the medical field, right? When they don't, when they want to show like, you know, an explodic view of a human being, right? The anatomy of a human being, even though there's no skin on that example of the anatomy, it's still white. It's still Anglo-Saxon, European centric. And so even when they're not trying to be biased, the bias is built right into it, right? And so someone found a need for that. I forget, it was an African brother who found a need for that a few years ago and started creating these books that had these Black babies in there for pediatrics and stuff like that, so that the kids can actually relate to it. You remember that, right?
Yeah, he was a medical student. He was in medical school, and he noticed that, hey, you know, when I look in a medical book, all of the drawings, medical drawings, they're all white. And you know, it's something that is so normalized that, you know, when he actually did it and made the change, part of it is, I think, that people have just become so accustomed to it because the medical field has been overwhelmingly, no one even stopped to think about these things. But, you know, he started to make illustrations because he's a talented artist as well. So no, I definitely remember that story. But I mean, to the greater argument on representation, like, once again, I don't see how you can downplay this. I mean, it's just, the data backs it up. We just know that people, you're already, if you're in a space where you're the only Black person, you see no one who looks like you. You know, I've already heard people always talk about imposter syndrome. Do you really belong there? You know, when you, if you're an underrepresented group where you've been purposefully left out of these spaces, you know, as you're going through the programs and things like that, you just can feel isolated. I remember, if you remember, when Ketanji Brown Jackson, she was getting confirmed, you know, she talked about walking through Harvard's campus and, you know, feeling like she didn't belong and it was just a rough day and should she really be here? And she saw another Black female who, you know, didn't really even say much to her, just like could tell by the look on her face, like, hey, I see that and I know what you're going through. And, you know, just basically told her, you know, keep pushing forward. And, you know, here she is in her hearing, like, you know, recalling that moment. So, I mean, we can't downplay this stuff. I mean, she's not in STEM, but once again, a very, you know, prestigious school, very demanding curriculum with law at a very prestigious school of, you know, like I said, people will face imposter syndrome and wonder, hey, if you look around, you see no one like you there, you're going to wonder, do you belong?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the doll test tells you how bad it really is.
Oh my God, the doll test is horrible.
Yeah, and the manosphere, we should have a helmet test. See which one they pick up.
What's going on? Helmet? What's going on?
What do you have to add to this, man?
Hey man, like it's kind of like in the military too, and corporate America as well. Like I've noticed those things to where it was highly isolating just being the only person there. Like you can have perfectly good treatment in those type of environments, but you would still underperform based on the type of, you know, self-esteem based issue that you're kind of the only one there. And so I don't know how you could be able to fix this unless you create a whole different class of people who's kind of in that classification. But I know because I went through it myself. So in both places, corporate America and the military, police force too, is the same thing. Highly isolated when you're the only person there. So.
But I think the Air Force has done a really good job at promoting more Black people. When I looked at the numbers, it seems like upward mobility in the military for Black people really comes at the Air Force branch rather than the other branches.
Well, the problem with that though is that the Air Force is the least. Correct me if I'm wrong, MOT. It's the least racially diverse branch. You see
least racially diverse by far.
Yeah. My understanding is that you see the majority of Black folks are going to be in the Army, and then you're going to see you're going to see an overrepresentation of Hispanics in the Marine Corps.
Yeah. I mean, but like for the officer, like they have to earn that shit because like Air Force promotes the least fastest of all branches too.
Mhm.
So in the Air Force, it is definitely meritocracy based. Definitely. Like if they're not just handing out rank in the Air Force, you got to go earn that shit. So that's the way that is now. Other branches I can't speak for. I know Army is probably the fastest I've ever seen. I've seen people get walked up to correctional custody for weed, and 3 months later they're back at E4 status. I'm like, how's this even happening when I seen all the stripes get taken away? But that's the way it is, man.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I think yeah. Go ahead, Renaissance man.
No, I was going to quickly say, trying to put something in the chat, talking about the influence of the teachers. But the other thing is, too, there's been studies to show, like, if you want to go down to the teacher level, as far as in these fields, getting into, say, these gifted programs where people are going to be disproportionately getting into something like a STEM or, highly competitive, highly performance, very rigorous type of curriculum, is that, if you don't even have representation at the teacher ranks, the students that can actually get in to those courses that you need to get on these tracks, to get into these programs, it becomes a problem. Like they've shown that they've shown that there's basically bias with a lot of teachers. If you have just like no diversity in your teachers, that there's a bias there, and you end up with, these honors courses, AP courses, advanced placement courses, they become disproportionately white. And when they go and do the research, like Dr. Steve Perry, that was one of the inspirations to start his school, Capital Prep, was he was noticing he was in one of the wealthier places in Connecticut for Black students. And, somehow they were either in like the remedial courses or like, or just like in a track of just a normal track. And then he'd go look at, the advanced placements courses, and he'd see that, it was disproportionately, white, wealthy kids. And, at one point he asked these kids, like, hey, what'd you do to, why are you on this track? You're a pretty smart kid. And he was like, I don't know. I was just, I was put there. And that's when he realized, hey, that, there's bias in the system. There's expectations of people's abilities that aren't really lining up. So if you don't have the teachers in place, you can't even get them into the field to begin with. And that just goes back to representation again.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but that has to be also a rigorous system to where you put these people in there in the first place. Like I actually a product of a person who was put in fucking special ed because I was fucking smart. And they was like, nah, man, we're gonna have to destroy this intelligence by any means necessary. They was like, oh yeah, work is supposed to be like school is supposed to be easy. And they were like just moving me around in different shit until my grandfather got involved. Like, there's nothing wrong with the child. The child could read at this at X, Y, like, no, person deserved to be in like AP courses and shit. And that's how I got back into that type of framework. But at the end of the day, they're trying to put my ass in special ed and hand my mother a check. She was like, I don't need no damn check. What's going on here? But that's how they would get everybody else on the same stuff. So.
Yeah, no, it's just about, we have to be able to cultivate more talent for teaching. You need to be able to take people that and put them through the process of being a teacher. And if that means that they have to be teaching assistants, government, local governments, city and state will have to find additional resources, financial resources to compensate these people so that you can have more teaching assistants in the classroom to break up that bias.
I say this, man, just put it in the defense budget. Yeah, just put it in the defense budget.
Yeah, but I mean, here's the thing. Like that goes back to the point, Mike. When you look at other countries that do so well in education, now the U.S. does, they have a lot higher. They have a lot higher view of teachers. Like in our society, teachers, when you look at some of these southern states, and you look at like, okay, to actually teach, I believe you need a master's degree in a lot of these places. or you got to pass an examination, one of the two. I think if you get the master's, that's part of the program, you pass the certification. But even if you get the master's, like, I mean, I want to say some of these states, you'll probably top out like at maybe $70,000 a year. And that's like after maybe like 10 years of teaching or something like that, 10, 20 years. Like, I would say starting even with the master's, it's like 40, maybe 40s, 50s. And it's just like, you compare that to what other master's degrees demand. And you can kind of just see, hey, the premium is not placed on, at least in some of these places. Now, granted, I know someone who lives up in Boston. He was saying that, for the science teachers, some of these schools, these suburban schools, what they will do is they will basically raise money from the parents and then pay like the science teachers. They'll pay them like if the pay is like $80,000, $90,000, they'll pay an extra $30,000 to that person to get them to like maybe like 120 to try to get them on par with what they would be making, say, in industry, utilizing that skill set to instead, stay in a classroom and teach their kids because, they see how important it is to have that talent in there, but that's not a national phenomenon.
Yeah, here they'll give you a voucher for buying putting money down on a house. I know in Singapore they pay them equal to the industry, teachers equal to the industry in civil service as
nice.
Well.
That's real.
Yes, yeah, because they don't want to lose their talent to private industry, and so they have to pay your more technical people, your technocrats, a lot more, and that includes teachers. And so that's why the turnover rate is significantly low, whereas in the United States, turnover rate is significantly high. Teachers are dropping out.
Pay the actual conditions of the classroom and everything else. Because in Mississippi, it's a bachelor's to be a teacher, a master's to be an assistant principal, and definitely a doctorate to be an actual principal of a school. So
I think that's standard. Yeah, I think that's standard across the country now. You got to have a PhD, and that's probably why somebody like Dr. Umar Johnson has been successful at, being involved in these areas because he has those credentials. But not everybody has those, and so I think we just need to figure out a better way of engaging, the development of cultivating talent in these areas, because there's some really good, brothers out there who can actually teach, man. When you really think about, some of the, some of the rappers and stuff like that who are influencers, a lot of them have undergrad degrees. They went to HBCUs like Daz Effects, all the bum, skitty bum, they, although they rap, crazy, they actually have a pretty decent academic background. They're not fools. So, there's ways of going about this. And I think that, the underrepresentation in STEM is structural. We just haven't really accepted that as of yet.
So we just got to build a culture of that, man. We can't really expect for external people to do it. We just got to have invested and involved parents. And that's why, like a friend of mine who's a PhD, he says that, dude, if you don't get them by fourth grade, you done lost them. Like forever. Like you're really not going to be able to get them back after the fourth grade. And that's why he's in Houston. So heavily kind of weighted towards these actual programs for like younger individuals. Because like once he said, like once they hit that kind of grade, if you ain't got them in some type of accelerated program, it's really not going to happen after that. And people need to be connected to the actual system and understand its statistics. So that way, before they even have a child, they can understand what more of the actual circumstances that they're putting their potential child in before they actually even get there. I mean, like I said, a lot of this stuff is culture-based that we're on the ground floor of actually building. But I do get the sentiment that there is no kind of infrastructure in place so that way these things can take place overall.
Well, yeah. Part of it too is like, you have people who have been in this field before, who are basically, grew up in, say, Palo Alto when, and that whole, tech boom, who were just kind of, in that ecosystem, unless you were like that rare Black person who was able to, take part in that because of, Jim Crow and all the other BS that was going on in this country, even up until even parts of the 70s in some places further on, like it's just, you're kind of playing from behind. And to your point, MOT, about, fourth grade, when you really start looking at these people who are in these spaces who are non-Black, you start to understand, it wasn't just like they stumbled into this. It was,
Nah, man,
I went to summer camp. Yeah, I went to summer camp when I was in science summer camp when I was 6th, 7th grade. I was a part of this organization in high school. I may have went to a high school that was specifically a STEM engineering-based type of program. I was applying for internships or getting involved in volunteering and things like that. Robert Smith, he talks about when he's in high school, he's living in Colorado, a little bit more liberal, and he's able to get an internship with Bell Labs as a 16-year-old because a college student backed out, and that puts him on the track to become a chemical engineer before he goes back, gets his MBA and goes and works at Goldman, and then ultimately starts Vista Equity Partners, becomes a VC. But like that's the thing, is all these things are in the infrastructure or in place for some of these people. So just because of our history in the country, we're sort of playing catch up, and playing from behind. And that, like you said, you got to have those things and to get people early engaged and know these things out there, so they don't show up in college or graduate high school, and then then all of a sudden find out about STEM and how much people are making and how do I get into it.
Yeah, man. He should have went the route of being a self-taught chemist, so that way he could be a YouTube or YouTube.
No, man, I got this on screen, man. This is Sharif El-Mekki, he was the founder and one of the lead people for the Center for Black Educator Development. Really good brother, man. I'm friends with him on Twitter. Have chopped it up with him. I actually been sharing his content the last 6 months or so on the Brain Trust in the community tab. They run a platform called 8 Black Hands, which is a podcast, which is 4 Black male PhD teachers who focus on the cultivation and development of Black education development. And so 8 Black Hands is the podcast, and they do a lot of dope stuff, man. If you can contribute any amount of money to them, I think that it's well deserved and goes a long way. They've been doing this for a long time, and they affirm Black men in these spaces. And so anybody who thinks that the manosphere is making a huge impact on around the world, man, you're sorely mistaken compared to what Sharif El-Mekki and some of those brothers are actually doing right now out there in Philly. Hands down, doing some of the best work. And then you got the Black Man's Lab in Georgia with those cats down there putting in some serious work. It's hard to understand people in this space who claim that the manosphere is having this big impact, but they can't show any content that reflects anything that we're talking about right now.
I mean, it's a big impact for them. It's not really a big impact for the people who's being impacted. Kind of what it is. I mean, it's good for their bottom line, but it's not really good for anybody's overall progress as a whole, because the whole point is to stagnate and lead these dudes lost, so that way they can look up to false idols and false father figures, so that way they can keep this kind of thing that they complain about ongoing by just shoveling more children into dangerous and situations that don't even work all that great. So we just got to showcase people who are actually out here doing the actual thing that they think is being done by having this complaint vortex about counterpart society, and just team up with those people and have those people on and have them talk about their experiences, just like they kind of vulcanize the space around foolishness. We got to vulcanize the space around actual progress and things that actually make sense, so that way you can show that there's a clear contrast, so that way there can't be any bleed over from one group to the next. You just don't have to choose what side you actually be in and stay on and stay around. So I think that's the best way to tackle this thing going forward.
Yeah, instead of worrying about whether or not women are going to date bus drivers and stuff like that.
Yeah,
you got to start cultivating your talent, before 4th grade, or you end up with bus drivers like that. So you don't want to be in that situation where you're being feeling rejected because someone didn't choose up on you because of that. I think I'll say this in closing. I think that to Renaissance's point, we're always feeling like we're playing catch up. I don't think the objective that Black people should take is we shouldn't be looking at trying to catch up with them. I think we should be looking at trying to raise the bar for ourselves, not compete with them, because they're not our competition, so to speak, because we're just playing in two different leagues, at this point, whether or not the Cleveland Browns go to the Super Bowl is immaterial to everybody in the XFL. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and I mean, this is something that has to be done kind of more on the ground level, because we know that most people are here to make friends and influence no one, but that's kind of what they own. And no matter what, you're still going to be alone with whatever you choose. You're still going to be a subsegment of the people who are just going to be making it. You just have to make that circle just even wider and even wider. And rather than expecting other people to come out here and do something for these boys, you can go out here and support some of the things that's already existing, bring these people on, have conversations with them, let them know that they have the support out here, so that way they can be able to expand what they're actually doing in your area and other areas. Like there's a lot of stuff that I took from Colorado and I took back to Mississippi, and it works well. And I was able to spend it on a fiscal savings type basis, and it was still able to have effective results, even though most of those people in that Mississippi, like that county, has never left, never went anywhere. So they don't have a frame of reference from a system or a standpoint where things work, especially from a statistical basis. Things work, because their idea is to spend more money. I'm like, no. Need to work more effectively. You can say this money, reallocate this money into other things, so that way you can have the money to actually invest in better services and other things. Like, it works better if you give them an iPad, whether you expect them to like put in or pay for something out of their own pocket. It's already taken care of. So just a lot of those kind of things, man. But we just have to show that we are not apart from society, that we're actually a part of it, and we need to be able to have the resources to actually invest in our own people, because we're part of this American experience too. So.
No, great point, Mike. No, when I think about it more from the angle, I think more about unfortunately, imagine if 5% of Black people got to really, be there in the 70s with Silicon Valley or whatever, when it was taken off. And in the sense of the legacy, I think of the legacy capital that you would have, in the sense of, if you're able to be there in that ecosystem of, or at least even if not in there, or be able to participate in mass in that ecosystem, that tech ecosystem back then, of that first wave of it, when you see the computer coming out. I mean, you do have people obviously like, Dr. Mark Dean and Lonnie Johnson, people like that who were into it. But if you had a broader mass, just a cultural capital that you could go and pass down as you get ready to go into this fourth industrial revolution, and you get into things like edge and quantum computing and things like that, being able to leverage that. So that's why I think it's more important now than ever to get into tech, is to get in before this next wave, so you catch that cultural capital. So then you've created the generations of people whose parents worked in this. They have that sort of almost that legacy of being able to kind of what you see in basketball right now, where you're seeing like Steph Curry, his dad Dale Curry, he got to grow up learning the game from him. Or LeBron James' son just committed to USC and looks like he's going to play in the NBA one day. You get to grow up learning that sort of institutionalized capital in your family is priceless.
Excellent way to end the night, man. Thank you all for joining us. Please hit the like button on the way out and hit that notification